I felt like something strange was going on in my house, so I faked a trip to visit my brother in Denver. While I was watching from across the street at my neighbor's place, George suddenly tapped my shoulder and said, "Wait until midnight, Patrick. You'll see everything." When the clock struck 12, what I witnessed made my blood run cold. But let me explain how I got to that point. My name is Patrick Thompson. I'm 64 years old, and I ended up hiding in my neighbor's house like some kind of criminal spying on my own property. What I discovered that night didn't just destroy my trust in my family. It showed me how far people you love will go when greed takes control of their hearts. This house in Phoenix, where I've lived for the past 32 years, is my sanctuary. Every square foot was built with the sweat and savings of my late wife Sarah and me. We bought this place when I was 32 and she was 29, newlyweds with big dreams and calloused hands. I was working construction then, framing houses during the Phoenix boom years. Sarah worked as a school secretary, keeping track of every penny we earned. The workshop in the back became my pride and joy. That's where I spent countless evenings after work, building furniture for our growing family, fixing neighbors' broken appliances, teaching myself electrical work that would later help me move up to project supervisor. Sarah would bring me iced tea on hot summer nights, sitting on the old folding chair while I sanded wood or sorted through hardware. When our daughter Amanda was born in 1989, that workshop became even more special. I built her crib there, her first bookshelf, a toy chest painted bright yellow because we didn't know if we were having a boy or girl. As she grew up, Amanda would spend hours in that workshop with me, handing me tools, asking endless questions about how things worked. Those were the happiest years of my life. Sarah in the kitchen making dinner, Amanda chattering away while I worked, the smell of sawdust and her mother's pot roast mixing in the desert evening air. The living room held our family life together. That's where we watched Amanda take her first steps, where we celebrated every Christmas morning, where we sat together during thunderstorms. Sarah picked out every piece of furniture, every lamp, every picture frame. She had a way of making our modest house feel like a palace. The kitchen was her domain, but she always welcomed company. Sunday mornings meant pancakes and bacon, the newspaper spread across the table, neighborhood kids wandering in and out like we were running some kind of informal community center. When Sarah got diagnosed with cancer 7 years ago, everything changed. Breast cancer, stage 3, discovered during a routine mammogram. I took early retirement at 57 to care for her full time. Those 2 years watching her fight that disease were the hardest of my life. The workshop sat mostly unused while I drove her to chemotherapy appointments, learned to cook the bland foods her stomach could handle, and tried to keep hope alive when the treatments weren't working. She died in our bedroom on a Tuesday morning in March, holding my hand, telling me to take care of myself and not let Amanda worry too much about me. I was 59 then, suddenly alone in a house full of 3 decades of memories. Every corner reminded me of her laugh, her voice, her touch. I honestly didn't know how I was going to manage. That's when Amanda stepped in. She was 30 then, married to Carlos Rodriguez for 3 years. They'd been living in a small apartment across town, saving money, talking about starting their own family someday. When Sarah died, Amanda insisted they move in with me. "You shouldn't be alone, Dad," she told me, tears in her eyes as we stood in the empty kitchen a week after the funeral. "This house is too big for one person. We can help with expenses, keep you company, make sure you're eating right." At the time, it felt like a blessing. Carlos was a good guy, worked hard as a plumber, treated Amanda well, showed respect for me and Sarah's memory. He helped me get the house back in order, fixed the leaky faucet in the guest bathroom that I'd been putting off for months, even helped me reorganize the workshop so I could start working on projects again. Amanda picked up where her mother left off in many ways. She grocery shopped for healthy meals, cooked family dinners, made sure I took my blood pressure medication, encouraged me to stay active and social. For the first time since Sarah's death, the house felt alive again. We'd sit together in the evenings watching TV, talking about their jobs, making plans for weekend projects. Carlos and Amanda were both working steady jobs then. He had a good position with a plumbing contractor. She was doing administrative work for a medical office. They paid me $800 monthly for their room and shared expenses, which helped with my fixed retirement income. Everything seemed to be working out perfectly. The first 8 months were genuinely happy. We settled into comfortable routines. I'd wake up early, make coffee, read the newspaper on the back porch while listening to desert birds wake up. Amanda would emerge around 7 o'clock a.m., rushing to get ready for work but always stopping to check on me, ask if I needed anything from the store. Carlos would grab coffee and head out to his job sites, usually with a quick wave and, "Have a good day, Patrick." Evenings brought us together in the living room or around the kitchen table. We'd share stories about our days, watch baseball games, play cards sometimes. Amanda inherited her mother's talent for making everyone feel comfortable and included. Carlos gradually opened up more, telling stories about his childhood in Tucson, his family's traditions, his dreams of eventually starting his own plumbing business. But about 4 months ago, something shifted. It was subtle at first, like a barely perceptible change in the desert wind that signals a storm coming. The smiles became a little forced. Conversations felt rehearsed rather than natural, and then the whispering started. At first I thought maybe I was being paranoid, that retirement and grief were making me oversensitive to normal family dynamics. But the whispers were real, and they were increasing. Every time I walked into a room where Amanda and Carlos were talking, they'd stop mid-sentence. Carlos would quickly put his phone away with movements that seemed almost guilty. Amanda would change subjects with that nervous laugh she'd had since childhood, the one that appeared whenever she was hiding something from her mother and me. "What were you two discussing?" I'd ask casually, trying to keep suspicion out of my voice. "Nothing important, Dad," Amanda would reply with that sweet tone that was starting to sound hollow and rehearsed. "Just work stuff, you know how it is. Bills and boring adult things," Carlos would add, but he couldn't quite meet my eyes when he said it. Bills. That word started coming up more and more in their deflections. But I knew their financial situation pretty well. They both had steady jobs, they paid me rent reliably, and they didn't live extravagantly. What bills could be so urgent and secret that they needed constant, hushed conversations? Then I started noticing changes to the house itself. The door to my workshop, which had always remained open except during actual projects, was now locked. Not just closed, locked with a new deadbolt I didn't remember installing. I discovered this on a Saturday morning when I wanted to retrieve some electrical wire to fix a loose outlet in the kitchen. My key didn't work. They had changed the lock on my own workshop without telling me. "Why is the workshop locked?" I asked Amanda that afternoon as she was preparing lunch. She answered too quickly, like she'd been rehearsing this response. "There's been some moisture problems back there, Dad. We didn't want your tools getting damaged. Carlos thinks there might be a small leak in the roof section over that area, but I didn't remember seeing any water damage. I didn't remember discussing moisture problems. And since when did Carlos make decisions about my workshop maintenance without consulting me? That space had been my domain for 32 years. Sarah used to joke that I knew every nail and screw in that building better than I knew the contents of our refrigerator. "I should take a look at this leak," I said. "I've done plenty of roof work over the years." "No need to worry about it," Carlos interjected, appearing from the living room. "I've got a buddy who does roofing. He's going to come by next week and give us an estimate." Next week came and went. No roofing contractor appeared. The workshop remained locked. When I asked about the delay, Carlos claimed the roofer had to reschedule due to other jobs. Then he said the guy was waiting for materials. The excuses kept changing, but the workshop stayed off limits. That's when I started paying closer attention to nighttime sounds. Our house sits on a corner lot with good sight lines, and desert nights are usually quiet enough to hear a pin drop. But lately, I'd been noticing unusual activity after I went to bed. Around 11 p.m. or midnight, I'd hear the front door opening and closing. Not the careful, quiet movements of someone trying not to wake others, more like normal daytime activity happening at inappropriate hours. Sometimes I heard cars pulling into the driveway with engines running, then leaving after brief periods. One Thursday night around 11:30 p.m., curiosity finally overcame my natural inclination to mind my own business. I got out of bed carefully, making sure not to creak the floorboards, and positioned myself at my bedroom window where I could see the front entrance and driveway. What I saw confused me at first. Amanda was standing in the doorway talking to a young woman I'd never seen before. The stranger was carrying a small, rolling suitcase and what looked like a laptop bag. They spoke quietly for a few minutes. Then the woman handed something to Amanda, something that looked distinctly like cash-changing hands. Amanda counted whatever she'd received quickly, then tucked it into her pocket and gestured for the woman to come inside. They walked toward the back of the house, in the direction of my locked workshop. I stayed at the window for another 20 minutes, but saw nothing else. No one left. No cars departed. The woman had simply vanished into my house like she belonged there. The next morning at breakfast, I decided to test the waters. "Did either of you hear that car in the driveway last night?" Sounded like someone might have been lost, looking for an address. Car? Amanda looked genuinely puzzled, but there was something forced about her confusion. I didn't hear anything. Did you, Carlos? Nope, he replied without looking up from his coffee. Probably just someone turning around in the driveway. Happens all the time in corner lots like this. But Carlos had lived here for over a year now. He knew perfectly well that our driveway was shaped in a way that made it inconvenient for casual turnarounds. And Amanda's confused expression had lasted just a fraction of a second too long, like she was buying time to formulate her response. I let it drop, but started paying more attention. Over the next 2 weeks, I documented a pattern. Thursday and Friday nights consistently brought mysterious visitors. Sometimes it was single travelers, sometimes couples, occasionally groups of 3 or 4 people. They always arrived after 10 o'clock p.m., always carried luggage, and always involved some kind of transaction with Amanda or Carlos. During daylight hours, I noticed Amanda making frequent trips to and from the workshop area, carrying cleaning supplies, fresh linens, and what appeared to be hospitality items like small bottles of shampoo and wrapped soaps, the kind of amenities you'd expect to find in a hotel room. The pieces were starting to form a picture I didn't want to believe. My daughter and son-in-law appeared to be running some kind of lodging operation out of my house, using my locked workshop as accommodation space without my knowledge or permission. But I needed proof before I could confront them. Accusations based on suspicion would only put them on guard and potentially damage family relationships if I was wrong. I needed to see this operation in full swing, document it, and understand exactly what they were doing. That's when I decided to give them exactly what they seemed to want: my absence from the house for an extended period. I would fake a trip to visit my brother in Denver, make them think they had complete privacy, then observe from a safe distance to see what really happened when they believed I was 1,100 miles away. The plan started forming in my mind. I would tell them about this fictional trip, watch their reactions, then coordinate with my neighbor George to maintain surveillance while I supposedly traveled. If Amanda and Carlos were running an illegal business out of my home, I was going to catch them red-handed. But first, I needed to talk to George Mitchell. George Mitchell lives directly across the street in a house he built himself back in 1985. He's 68 years old, a retired Phoenix police sergeant with 32 years on the force, and we've been neighbors since I moved to this street. George is the kind of man you want watching your back, observant, reliable, and blessed with that cop instinct that never really retires. His house sits elevated slightly above street level, giving him clear sight lines to my entire front yard, driveway, and the side path that leads to my workshop. Over the years, George and I had developed the kind of friendship that comes from shared morning coffee conversations, borrowed tools, and mutual respect. He'd helped me through Sarah's illness, bringing meals when I was too exhausted to cook, checking on me during those dark months after her death. The afternoon I decided to approach him about my suspicions. George was in his garage working on an old Chevy pickup that had been his retirement project for the past 3 years. I found him elbow-deep in engine components, wearing his usual oil-stained coveralls and the concentration expression of a man who understood mechanical problems. "Patrick," he said, looking up as I approached. "You look like a man with something heavy on his mind." I'd always appreciated George's directness. No small talk, no dancing around issues. I sat on his workbench and laid out everything I'd observed over the past 2 weeks. The late-night visitors, the cash transactions, the locked workshop, Amanda's evasive answers, Carlos's shifty behavior. George listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or asking clarifying questions. When I finished, he wiped his hands on a shop rag and gave me a look I'd seen him use during our neighborhood watch meetings, the expression of a cop processing evidence. "Patrick," he said slowly, "I've been wondering when you were going to notice." My heart sank. "You've seen it too?" "For about 6 weeks now," George confirmed. "Different people coming and going at all hours, always with luggage, always brief encounters with Amanda or Carlos. I've been keeping mental notes, wondering if I should say something or mind my own business." He walked to a small desk in the corner of his garage and pulled out a pocket notebook, the kind cops carry everywhere, even in retirement. Thursday, October 12th. Couple in their 20s arrived 11:15 p.m. Left Friday, 7:30 a.m. Friday, October 13th. Single male, business attire, arrived 10:45 p.m. Left Saturday, 8 o'clock a.m. The notebook contained 3 weeks of detailed observations, Dates, times, descriptions of guests, vehicle information, where visible. George had been conducting an informal surveillance operation on my house without me even knowing it. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked, though I already understood his dilemma. "Because I hoped I was wrong," George replied. "Because accusing someone's family of criminal activity isn't something you do lightly. And because I wanted to give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe these were friends in need, relatives going through hard times, legitimate explanations for everything." "But you don't think so anymore." George shook his head. "Not after last Thursday night. I saw Amanda accept what looked like $160 cash from a group of 4 people. That's not helping friends, Patrick. That's operating a business." The number hit me like cold water. $160 for one night, from one group. If they were charging $40 per person per night, and if this was happening regularly on weekends, we were talking about significant money. "I need to see this operation in action," I said. "I need proof of what they're doing before I can confront them about it." George closed his notebook and looked at me seriously. "What did you have in mind?" I explained my plan to fake the Denver trip, to make Amanda and Carlos believe they had complete privacy while I observed from a distance. George's police training immediately kicked in. "That could work," he said thoughtfully. "My upstairs bedroom window has perfect sight lines to your property. You could stay in my guest room, use binoculars if necessary, document everything they do when they think you're not watching. You'd be willing to help with this? Patrick, if your family is running an illegal lodging business out of your house without your consent, that's fraud and theft. Maybe tax evasion too, depending on whether they're reporting this income. As a retired cop, I can't just ignore that. And as your friend, I won't let them take advantage of you." We spent the next hour planning the details. I would announce the Denver trip that evening, make a show of packing and leaving the next day. George would pick me up at Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport after Carlos dropped me off, bringing me back to his house through the alley so Amanda and Carlos wouldn't see me return. "One more thing," George said as we wrapped up our planning. "I think you should document everything we observe. Take photos if possible. Keep detailed notes with times and dates. If this becomes a legal matter, evidence will be crucial." That evening, I returned home and began my performance. During dinner, I casually mentioned my fictional Denver trip. "I'm flying to Denver tomorrow to spend a week with my brother," I announced while cutting into Amanda's meatloaf. "Haven't seen him since Christmas, and he's been asking me to visit." The reaction was immediate and telling. Carlos looked up from his plate with an expression of barely concealed relief. Amanda's face brightened in a way that seemed more about my departure than my family reunion. "That's wonderful, Dad," she said with enthusiasm that felt forced. "You need to get out more, see family. The change of scenery will do you good." "Absolutely," Carlos added, nodding vigorously. "Travel is important, especially at your age. Don't worry about anything here. We'll take care of everything. Don't worry about anything here." Those words rang with unspoken meaning. They wanted me gone. They needed me gone. My absence was necessary for something they had planned. "I'll need you to water my garden plants every other day," I continued, testing their eagerness. "And keep the house tidy. You know how I feel about clutter." "Of course," Amanda replied quickly. "Everything will be perfect when you return. Just focus on enjoying your trip." Perfect. They wanted everything to be perfect, perfect for their illegal business operation to run without interference from the actual property owner. That night, I lay awake listening to the sounds of my house, knowing this would be my last night sleeping here before discovering the complete truth about what Amanda and Carlos were doing. I heard their voices through the walls, urgent whispered conversations that confirmed they were planning something for my absence. By morning, I was ready to execute the plan that would expose their deception once and for all. The next morning, I performed my departure routine flawlessly. I packed my old duffel bag with clothes and toiletries, making sure Amanda and Carlos witnessed every detail. I called my brother from the kitchen phone, speaking loudly enough for them to hear me confirm travel plans that didn't exist. Carlos insisted on driving me to Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport, just as George and I had predicted. During the 25-minute drive, he was unusually chatty, asking about my brother's health, Denver's weather, how long I planned to stay. His eagerness to see me board that plane was barely concealed. At the departure terminal, Carlos walked me to the security checkpoint, hugged me goodbye, and said, "Have a safe trip, Dad. Don't worry about anything at home." "I'll call you when I land," I replied, and walked toward the security line. But instead of proceeding through security, I waited in a coffee shop near the gate area for 90 minutes, giving Carlos time to drive home and settle into whatever routine they had planned for my absence. At 11:30 a.m., I met George at passenger pickup. We drove back to his house through residential side streets, avoiding my neighborhood until we could approach his garage from the rear alley. By noon, I was positioned at George's upstairs bedroom window with a clear view of my own property. The first few hours were quiet. Amanda left around 1:00 p.m., returning 2 hours later with multiple shopping bags, groceries, cleaning supplies, and what appeared to be small toiletry items. She made several trips to the workshop area, carrying linens, towels, and supplies like she was preparing hotel rooms. Carlos returned from work at his usual time, 5:30 p.m., but instead of his normal routine of showering and relaxing, he immediately began helping Amanda with preparations. Through George's binoculars, I watched them transform my workshop into active guest accommodation. The first customers arrived at 7:15 p.m., a young couple with hiking backpacks and outdoor gear, clearly tourists visiting Arizona. Amanda greeted them with professional smiles, accepted $80 cash, and personally escorted them to the workshop entrance. $40 per person, George noted, updating his surveillance log, just like I calculated. By 9:00 p.m., 3 more guests had arrived, a solo business traveler who paid $40, and a couple with expensive luggage who handed over another $80. My workshop was housing 5 strangers, generating $200 revenue for a single night. If they operate 4 nights per week at this capacity, I calculated grimly, they're making $3,200 monthly. Over $9,600 in the 3 months since this operation started. The anger I felt was beyond anything I'd experienced since Sarah's death. My own daughter and son-in-law had stolen nearly $10,000 from me, using my property, my utilities, my investment without my knowledge or consent. They had violated my home, my trust, and my financial security. But George had told me to wait until midnight. There's something else you need to see, he'd said earlier, something that happens after the regular guests settle in. At 11:45 p.m., my patience was rewarded. The side door of my house opened quietly, and Carlos emerged with a man I didn't recognize, tall, well-dressed, carrying a business briefcase. They walked not toward the street, but toward my workshop. George leaned forward intently. "This is what I was waiting for you to witness." The 2 men entered the workshop. Through the small windows, I could see shadows moving, papers being exchanged, the briefcase being opened. This clandestine meeting lasted 20 minutes. When they emerged, the stranger left through my back gate, while Carlos returned to the house. "Who is that?" I asked George. Based on his schedule and behavior, I believe he's either their business partner or someone they're paying for permits, protection, or silence. He shows up every Friday night, always with that briefcase, always conducting business after the regular guests are settled. The complete picture was now clear. Amanda and Carlos weren't just running an illegal bed and breakfast operation. They had a systematic business with regular partners, established routines, and professional-level organization. They had turned my home into their personal profit center. The next morning, I called Jennifer Hayes, a lawyer who had handled Sarah's estate planning. After explaining the situation and showing her George's documentation, Jennifer was furious on my behalf. "Patrick, this constitutes multiple felonies: fraud, theft, operating an unlicensed business, possible tax evasion. With the evidence you've gathered, we can shut down their operation immediately and pursue damages." We coordinated with the Phoenix Housing Authority for a surprise inspection Thursday evening, when George's observations indicated peak occupancy. Inspector Rodriguez arrived at 8:30 p.m. with backup enforcement, catching Amanda and Carlos with 6 active guests, cash transactions, and undeniable evidence of commercial operation. The inspection was swift and devastating. Amanda tried to claim the guests were family friends, but when directly asked, the visitors admitted they had booked accommodations online and paid nightly rates. The housing inspector documented everything, issued $5,000 in municipal fines, and ordered immediate cessation of all commercial activity. I returned home Friday morning, ending my fake Denver trip. Amanda and Carlos were waiting with panicked expressions and desperate explanations about misunderstandings and helping friends. But I'd seen too much, documented too much, and lost too much trust to accept their lies. "I was never in Denver," I told them calmly. "I was across the street at George's house, watching everything. I know about the illegal rental business, the cash transactions, and your midnight meetings with business partners. The confrontation that followed was painful, but necessary. Amanda cried and pleaded, claiming they had bills and needed money. Carlos tried to justify their actions as making use of empty space, but their excuses couldn't overcome the weight of evidence. They had stolen from me systematically for months. You have 48 hours to move out, I told them. Both of you. They left Saturday morning with minimal drama. Amanda's final note apologized and asked for eventual forgiveness. Carlos simply left his house keys on the kitchen counter. 3 months later, I live alone again in my house. It's peaceful, secure, and completely mine. George still comes over for coffee twice weekly, and we've become even closer friends through this ordeal. My workshop has been restored to its original purpose. I'm building bird feeders now, something Sarah always wanted for our backyard. Every morning, I sit on my back porch with coffee, watching desert sunrises and appreciating the quiet dignity of controlling my own life. At 64, I've learned that protecting your rights isn't selfish, it's survival. Trust once broken by family betrayal doesn't simply repair itself, but self-respect once reclaimed provides foundation for whatever comes next. The house is mine again. My life belongs to me again, and that's enough.